everybody, this is Ryan from Try Running Programs, and today's video is focused on the second training program that I'll be using on this channel, and that is the Hanson's Advanced Marathon Training Program, which can be navigated to by going to hansons-running.com pages/training plans. And if you even navigate to just their basic homepage, there's a plans button you could then click on Advanced Marathon to then pull up the training PDF. So this plan is not terribly unique in that it follows a very similar ramping up of about 38 miles in the first week, and then it will top out eventually at 61 miles and then have a taper, though admittedly I find their taper to be less tapery than other marathon programs in that it's not a huge drop off in mileage, it's just more of a drop off in quality, which I think is kind of nice because it keeps building that base, keeps the base strong, I should say. In terms of your aerobic base. So I think that's a really fantastic kind of function of the program. So before I dive into really what the program does in terms of its week by week basis, I want to go down and talk about some of the training plan definitions, the key as they put it, and some of the pace discussions and things of that nature. Now, what you will find with this particular plan compared to the Hal Higdon plan that I reviewed before is that Hal Higdon on his particular site is very thorough about what he means by every single run. I think this particular program has a lot less deviation in the type of work that you're doing. It's basically either easy run, long run, or some type of interval type repeat. And that's essentially how you run the program. But with that being said, if you're somebody who's not as familiar with the Hanson style of training, there's really kind of three things you should know. Firstly, the book, Hanson's Marathon Method, is actually a very great book. If you're interested in a review of it, I believe Sage Candidate has a very detailed review on his channel, and I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, I have read it, I've perused it. Admittedly, haven't read it in quite some time, but it is a very good book, and it does detail very thoroughly how they train for marathons, well, how they train athletes and recommend those types of training events. So with that being said, if you don't have the book, or you do have the book, it really doesn't matter. Another great aspect of using this training program is the Luke Humphrey Running Community. And this is a great, great resource. Joining it on Facebook, I highly recommend it because this group of folks are generally speaking people who are relatively highly experienced in training for a marathon. And then secondly, they're also very experienced with using this particular style of training. So if you have a question, you can post it here. People will respond to you incredibly quickly. I have found that this community brings a lot of great kind of additional knowledge into this particular training style. So I'm a big fan of the community, highly recommend joining it if you're going to use a Hanson style of training, but ultimately that's your choice to make. Now, the third and final piece of this is really the discussion of pacing, and they talk about this a little bit in this particular guide, addendum, I should say, at the end of their training program. But really what you will find is that they just provide some quick definitions about kind of the abbreviations that they use. Firstly, M can stand for miles or meters, and this could be a little confusing if you're slightly newer to running. Basically, if the number is a single digit or a double digit number, they're most likely referring to miles. If it's a triple digit number or higher, it is most likely that they're talking about meters. And this makes most sense when you're looking at it from a total mileage versus a repeat perspective. And I think that's relatively self-explanatory. Now, another thing that they do is they do a lot of work at marathon pace and right below marathon pace. And so naturally, MP for them stands for marathon pace. And then you'll see a lot of workouts that are MP minus 10 seconds. And that very simply is notating that you would take your marathon pace, remove 10 seconds per mile, and that would be the ultimate speed work that you'd be doing for that day. So of course, they notate the example here. If you're running an 8-minute mile, then a goal pace in an MP minus 10 second workout would be 750 per mile. So I think relatively self-explanatory on that front. Now, the last key tool to really maximizing the use of this particular training program is the pace calculator. So what you would do is you would select the distance and then ultimately the goal time that you would like to achieve, and then it will notate all of the types of training paces that you should have in accordance to the training program that you're running. Now, you can get a little fancy with this and actually include potential weather. I think that's a great idea, but the problem is that's kind of crystal ball thinking. We don't know what it's going to be like on race day. So I generally just skip this. But in my case, I'm someone who's eyeing trying to run a 1 hour, 20-minute half marathon, roughly an 80-minute half marathon later this year. So I'm going to try to do a majority of my training using that in mind. And so with that kind of in, kind of the back of my mind, naturally that would be training to run a half marathon slightly above 6-minute pace. And so it details out the types of training paces that I should have. So my easy runs should be somewhere in the neighborhood of the high 7s to the high 8s. A moderate run would be in the mid 7s to mid 8s, and then so on and so forth. So you can see they break it down from everything from easy runs to long runs to VO2 max workouts to tempos and strides. So any particular type of workout that you have, if you're unsure of what your target pace should be, you can just refer back to the calculator and go, okay, so today I should be aiming to run my miles within this window. And by and large, these windows, I think, are pretty generous, because I think we all know we'll go out on a run sometimes and we just won't have our best stuff. And having a minute window is a huge difference over especially more longer pace running. That gives you a lot of leeway to still hit your plan without taking kind of a step back mentally or losing confidence. So you're staying within the window that's expected of you. Another great thing is if you're kind of unsure of what you want to run, the calculator will also spit out equivalent race performances. So if you know that you can run, for example, roughly an 18-minute 5K, then you can probably start to aim for a 1 hour, 20-minute half marathon, and so on and so forth. So I find the equivalent race performances to be a nice little added feature of this particular calculator. And to navigate here, you'd want to go to lukehumphrey.running.com and then /HMM calculator / again, and that would take you to one of these three calculators where you can either look at your improvement percentage, which is kind of cool to see how you've improved over the course of time, or the treadmill calculator, which I don't particularly use, but it can be helpful. And then lastly, there's the pace calculator, which I think is the greatest feature on this site. So that's kind of all of the background information about the program. So what do you do during the program? Well, the first week is a 38-mile week, very simple week. And I suppose before I even jump into that, the structure of these weeks are very simple. Monday and Tuesday you run, Wednesday you would take off, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Thursday through Sunday, I should say, you would go ahead and perform various types of runs. Primarily, you'll see a lot of easy running in this plan. It's kind of a good mix of speed work with a lot of easy running, though I will say this has more speed work than the Hal Higdon Advanced 1 plan. You can already see that in the document itself. So the first week is almost all easy mileage, just to continue base building up to a 38-mile total. In the second week, this is when we start to introduce one speed effort. So you can see that they have you warm up a little bit and then perform roughly 400 repeats, somewhere between 5K to 10K pace with a 400-meter jog rest in between repetitions. And then the rest of the week is easy miles. And then as we progress into the program, this is when you're going to start to see that there's multiple workout days. And so this is why this rest day exists on the Wednesday. That's the methodology behind it, is because they want to have you do an easy effort at the start of the week to kind of recover from the previous week's long run, then to jump into a speed effort of some kind, then take a rest day and do another workout the day after that. And so you'll see a lot of repeats on Tuesdays, and then a lot of tempo runs on the Thursday following your rest day. And some of those will be at marathon pace, some of those will be at marathon pace minus 10 seconds. So I won't read down every single week, but essentially you can see it follows the same methodology of easy day Monday, speed day Tuesday, rest day Wednesday, speed day Friday, 2 easy days, and then a long run of some variety. Or on days where there's a little bit more effort in the particular speed work, you might just have a longer easy run again on a Sunday. So that's kind of the nifty thing of this program, is that there are a lot of long runs. I don't find them to be as quick in terms of jumping up in distance as the Hal Higdon Advanced 1 program is. That's another area of comparison worth making. So as you move down through the program, the top week in terms of mileage would be roughly week, I want to say it's 13 or 14. It's actually week 15, excuse me, where you would top out at 61 miles, and then you would start a very light taper down from there, with the final week still being in the 50-mile range, being 52 miles. So from the top mileage week at 61 miles at week 15, you go down to 55 miles the following week, then 53 miles the week after that, and then 52 miles the week after that. So it's really one of those things where, there's not a huge drop off in the overall training volume because they're expecting you to still run roughly 26 miles or so on race day. And then the back half of that particular week would be your actual marathon if you were running a marathon. So in my case, I'm using this to train for a half marathon. So this will be a little bit more mileage, I suppose, than necessary. But naturally, I think anybody would agree with me if you're trying to, kind of improve your running over time. Continuing the more higher mileage type training is a huge benefit. So this is a fun looking program in my opinion, because it follows a very simplistic style. It's very easy to get into, very easy to understand. Just for background reference, I am a runner who is a 31 male. I'm 6'2", and I've been running roughly now since 2017, so for about 4.5 years. And last year I was running on average somewhere between 30 to 40 miles a week, with one week up into the 60s. So this is a plan that I think that I can handle. I would think that you'd probably need to have about a year or two of running under your feet to have great success with this type of plan. And you'd probably want to have a decent kind of pre-build up to this, basically a thorough base building phase to get the most out of this plan. So with that said, I'm going to be using this to train for a race loosely in the April region, and hopefully we'll do just like the Hal Higdon plan did for me, which was a huge success. I found it was a great program. So I think this is a natural next step in terms of both mileage and the increase in the amount of speed work, with it being a lot of repetition, interval-based training, and a lot of tempo-based training. So with that said, I hope that gives you a loose overview of what the plan achieves to do, the different tools that I think you can use to benefit from it. And lastly, Luke Humphrey, one of the kind of coaches at Hanson's, or at least used to coach for Hanson, he has a good addendum video that details kind of why this program is made the way that it is. So I will link his video in the description of this one so that you can get an idea of kind of why they structured it the way that they did. But with that said, I think really with the PDF alone and with the race equivalency calculator and the pacing calculator, that's really enough to get going with this program, so long as you have some decent miles under your feet. So I hope that was helpful in terms of detailing what the plan is. And I look forward to seeing you guys in my weekly training updates.